things are stagnated or total despair. So, Gabriel, I take it that people cannot see the results yet until you show the results, right?
Until then.
Until you show the results. All right, the votes are coming in thick and fast. I'm not going to show my hand by telling you which one is leading. Do you have someone with you, Gabriel, to mute if a noise is coming from somewhere?
I'm looking at everybody. And David is also here with me.
All right. So we have about 37 votes that are coming. And it's still coming in thick and fast. Okay. So, Gabriel, I think we can launch the results. It gives a representative view. Have you launched the results?
Yes, sir.
Julia, can you see the results?
Yes, I can see the results, yes.
I don't want to be the INEC chairman of this polling station. Julia, can you read the results for us?
So the results show that 46% of the people who voted feel that things are looking up. 28% feel the environment is still stagnated, and 26% ranked despair as the current economic environment. So if you look at in terms of numbers, 18 people say things are looking up, 11 say things are stagnated, and 10 say things are a little bit in despair.
All right. So I'm happy that the majority feel, well, it's not the majority, it's 46, but it's still the most of the numbers feel that things are looking up. Then about an equal number feel that things are stagnated and things are in despair. So 56%, 8 and 6, so 8 and 6 is 14. 54% believe that things are stagnated or in despair, and then 46 believe that things are looking up. So it's about even numbers. Before Juliet starts her share, I'm going to ask Gabriel to launch a second poll, and that is more to do with how I'm doing with my current job. So Gabriel, can you launch the poll? How am I doing at my current job? Maybe to give Juliet some impetus into our own talk. Poll 2, Gabriel.
Yes, sir. People are voting already.
Oh, okay. I'm not seeing it, so you guide me. You'll be my eyes and ears.
Yes, sir. So far, we have 25 votes going up. We just hit 34. Think if we have one more, that means we have the same number that voted for the first poll. Okay, good.
So can you launch the results?
Shared.
Wiebe, can you see the results? Let me see whether Wiebe can see the results.
Yes, I can.
Wiebe, I don't want to
All right.
do any INEC polling here. Can you read the results for us?
Yeah, absolutely. So it looks like we have a very optimistic and a crowd here that is doing very well in their careers. 87% say their career opportunities are growing. 13% say they plateaued, and 0% fear redundancy.
Fantastic. This is even better than the first poll. I think people are very upbeat, which is good. You know, when you test the temperature, then you know what it's saying rather than listening to individual snippets. So here we are, and this is what the feeling is. Without further ado, I call on Juliet to take the floor. Juliet. You're mute, Juliet.
Yeah, thank you, Austin. Gabriel, if you don't mind putting the slides, the few slides I have up.
It's coming.
Okay. So while the slides are coming up, yes, I'm glad we had the last the second poll. So it kind of validates my thinking when I was trying to prepare for this, because one thing is clear. We're talking to this conversation is among people who have come from diverse industries, diverse backgrounds. You have some are early stage in terms of their businesses, some are in more mature businesses. So it's really, different experiences. And despite the challenges and the the uncertainties in the environment, you're still able to navigate, you're still able to grow your business. So that's really tremendous, something to be very happy about. And that's also the reason why I thought that for a group like this, strategy is very contextual. So what works in a particular context, a particular industry, a particular time and place may not necessarily work for every business. So what I decided to do was, rather than tell you what to do, which you already know how to do very well in your own specific businesses, is kind of share some historical stories that have helped me as I navigated different kinds of conditions. And maybe in the telling, we can all take home one thing or two in terms of lessons learned and things we can apply. So Gabriel, if you can go to the next slide. Okay. So I'm bringing to you like 3 stories. So bear with me. The first one is from Sea Navigation. You might have heard about the story of Ernest Shackleton, but if you haven't, this was someone who set up on a voyage to go to Antarctica, one of the furthermost, one of the 2 furthermost points on the planet. And of course, the journey was well heralded in the press, and it was funded by the government. And the ship was prepared, was called the Endurance. Okay. Now, he had planned to cross, this was an epic journey to cross the last uncharted continent on foot. But in January 1915, after battling their way through thousands of miles of dense ice and all that, and just 1 day away from the final destination, they got locked in an island of ice. So Shackleton had to make a very, very difficult decision to abandon ship, and changed his strategy from reaching where he was going, which was the furthermost point on charted waters and in the Antarctica, to saving his crew, to making sure that at the end of the day, he had the 27 men that he took with him and himself that came back alive. So the journey changed from going to the Antarctica to navigating an impossible journey across 850 miles across the South Atlantic to find a way to save everybody on board and to rescue an entire team. It was the mission initially, of course, was to make it to that end of the world. But at the end of the day, he was celebrated for the resilience, for the ability to figure out what was important when the circumstances and the context around him changed dramatically. That's what he was remembered for. Shackleton was probably not the best businessman. He never quite did quite well in business, but his story on how he navigated that extremely difficult situation is well recorded in history. Many years after this happened, one of the great explorers of the time, Sir Raymond Priestley, made a comment. He said, "If you are looking for scientific discovery, give me Scott." Scott is another explorer. "If you want speed and efficiency, of travel. Give me Amundsen. Amundsen is another scholar. But he said, but when disaster strikes and hope seems lost, get down on your knees and pray for someone like a Shackleton. Okay. So this was a very important story around resilience, around figuring out what matters, around throwing out all the, because they had supplies, they had to lose all the supplies. At some point, it was all about just having those 27 men rescued and alive. And if you had to throw out gear, if you had to throw out fuel, if you had to throw out everything else, but just keep them alive and rescued and making it to the final destination, that was the important thing. So that's why I picked this story. It was a very important story of resilience. Next slide, Gabriel. The next story I chose, and like I said when I started, I'm using these stories because they have resonated with me in my own career. I also think that there is something to be learned from each of them. And rather than tell you what to do, like I said, you know precisely what to do in your businesses. I just hope that each one of them can tease something in your mind about how you navigate. Perhaps there's something you can adjust. Perhaps there could be something you can learn or something you can apply in your own situation, in your own particular context. So the Battle of Red Cliffs, I don't know if some of you have seen the movie. It was a true story. It's during the Three Kingdoms period in China. Here was, this was a battle. It was a standard David and Goliath kind of a situation where the alliance of Zhuge Liang, who's well celebrated in the eastern part of the world, that is Asian part of the world, as one of the greatest strategists that ever existed. And Liu Bei and Su Quan, just forget about the names, just know that there's an alliance that's fighting against a formidable enemy that had an army of 800,000 soldiers. And the alliance had only 50,000 soldiers. Okay. So how could they have survived and still won the battle? And not just that they won the battle, they sent the enemy running tail between his legs back to where he came from. Against all odds, they had to exploit many things in the environment, the terrain, the weather conditions, and they also had to use deceit to defeat Cao Cao. Cao Cao was the warlord who was trying to annex their territory and then rule all of China under one unified country. So they had to try so many things. For example, 50,000 soldiers against 800,000. They lacked arrows. So what did they do? They fitted out their boats with straw, unmanned, and sent them off to where the enemy was camped. And as soon as the enemy saw it, say, here's the enemy coming. It's time for a battle. They shot all their arrows to kill the soldiers. Then they retreated their boats. And of course, all the arrows they didn't have, they suddenly had it because the enemy had provided all the arrows to them. So that's what they call, they borrow the arrows from the enemy, which is, if you read the book, The Art of War by Sun Tzu, one of the strategies there is about borrowing your tools from the enemy. And this was very, very, very insightful. One of the other things that they also looked at, and this is about exploiting the weather conditions. Now, you can talk about weather conditions, but you can also look at what's the ecosystem around you. How do you exploit it? How do you use the best of the ecosystem that exists around you? So Zhuge Liang knew that he could understand the wind and where the wind was going. He understood that the east wind had a particular pattern of which it was going to flow. And so he knew that if they started a fire on one of the boats of the enemy, that the wind would blow the fire towards the rest of the boats. And they didn't have to work hard. 50,000 men, what could they do against 800,000 people? But if you use the wind, work with the wind in your favor, then you can set their boats on fire. One boat, the wind will help you to move the fire to the second boat. And before you know it, you had all their boats were on fire, basically. And once their boats are on fire, then you few men that you have, you can then use them to attack them on the land. And that's how precisely how they won the battle. So again, what did I learn from this? it's the fact that sometimes it's not about your particular competencies and your skills and what you have. It's about also understanding the terrain and what is available within the terrain that you can use to navigate the complexities of the environment in which you are, and therefore win and grow your business. So those are some of the things that this other story teaches as well. The last slide, the last example I will give is a much more modern, more current situation, literally last week. So last week, I had a session with some Chinese entrepreneurs, and I pretty much said to them, I said, look, I'm going to have this meeting with a couple of entrepreneurs just like you in Africa, and the topic is about navigating uncertainties in the environment. So can you guys tell me, how have you navigated uncertainties in economic environment? I mean, China has been literally hit hardest, I would say, if not maybe just harder than most countries, given the current environment in terms of tariffs and so on and so forth. How have you navigated? How has China survived? And they said to me, you know, there's one word we use in China. It's called Neijuan, and it means involution. It means when the environment is uncertain, don't think about evolution. Think about involution. Think about what you can do internally. And they literally demonstrated it for me. And what they did was, and I'll try to demonstrate it for you. They took a piece of paper like this. It's just a piece of paper. They folded it into half, folded it again, folded it one more time. When they could no longer fold it, they started to squeeze it, squeeze it, and squeeze it until they squeezed it till there's nothing left. They said in every single industry in China, that's how entrepreneurs think. Squeeze and get every single thing that you can possibly use within the company and have it available to be able to navigate the top environment. Use everything you have. And they gave me an example. They said, oh, one of the things you've eaten since you came to China was what? It's called Peking duck, right? Yeah. You have eaten, we serve you every part of the duck. We waste nothing. The feet, the flesh, the skin, the tongue, the head, everything has been used in food. It's the same way the same principle we apply to our businesses, especially in uncertain environments. We don't waste anything. We think about every single thing, and every single thing has to be absolutely adding value. If you cannot answer yes or no to whether it is adding value or not, it's not something that you should keep. And it's something that is probably taking away and destroying value. So I learned that as well, and I thought that it would be something to share with you at a difficult time like this. And maybe there's something that we can all take away in terms of how we run our different businesses. Thank you very much for listening, and I'll wait until much later. We can take questions. Thanks, Austin. Thank you, Gabriel.
Juliet, thanks indeed. Great share. I learned involution. I'm going to try and squeeze that paper. The paper being my environment, my being squeezed until I can get nothing out, and continue to squeeze. As Juliet has said, you have opportunities for questions very shortly. But before Wiebe comes on, I would like Gabriel to launch a poll, maybe to help Wiebe to see where we are in terms of infrastructure. Gabriel, can you launch poll 3? Which infrastructure is most lacking? Poll 3 is up, and the votes have already started coming in. Is it internet penetration? Is it roads? Is it power? Is it transport? Which one gives you sleepless nights? Okay. The votes are coming in thick and fast. All right. So, Gabriel, can you launch the results? Wiebe is smiling. I think Wiebe thinks he knows the answer,
Well,
but
I
he may
saw the
not.
answer, but I also know the answer. Yeah, I was in that business. So
Yes, Wiebe, you tell us what you see. You are the INEC chairman of this polling station.
NEPA,
What do you see?
NEPA.
NEPA. All right. I think it's the overwhelming majority. 73% say it's power that is giving them problems, followed by internet penetration and roads at 10% each, and then transportation, which is maybe train, trucks, and so on, 8%. Wiebe, I know you've done a whole lot of work in the area of power, and I don't know whether you're going to cover power or not, but over to you, Wiebe. The floor is yours.
Yeah, so ironically, I'm not specifically going to talk about power, but I will talk about two companies or two programs that were related to solving the power problems. Can everyone see me and hear me okay? Is it clear?
I can see you and I can hear you. I
Okay,
can see
good.
that you have a lot of books. You read a lot.
Well, those are actually kids' books behind me. I'm in the basement at home, so I'm working from home today. So, um, Gabriel, can you put on the yeah, thank you. The slide. Perfect. Okay. So yeah, good to have a nice crowd out today. Again, happy Independence Day. It's hard to believe Nigeria is 65 already, which means that something like maybe at most 10% of Nigeria's population was actually born before independence. And so, we're very soon going to be at the point where such a small number of people were born before independence, that it's high time that we have a fully and clear Nigerian identity, but it's obviously a project that's still ongoing. So good to see some friends and old colleagues on. I wanted to give a shout out to my best and closest childhood friend, Danlami Gumwalk, who's joining us from Abidjan. He's with the AFDB. The second case study I'm going to talk about, I was actually staying at his house when that happened. So Danlami, good to have you on. And a few others I'll call out along the way. So I'm actually kind of going in the opposite direction of Juliet. I'm actually going to focus on very specific and personal business examples, business case studies in Nigeria from my 20 to 25 years of doing business in various sectors in Nigeria, to kind of illustrate some points as well. So she kind of did it on the global scale, historical scale, and I'm doing it on the kind of personal and Nigeria scale. So just to start with, and I'm going to then illustrate all of these five P's through the presentation. And I know that there's like the 5 P's that everybody learns in business school, but I'm gonna hijack them and change it to something different. So these are the 5 P's of surviving economic wahala, particularly for Nigeria. So first of all, this one is, I mean, some of these are relatively obvious, but sometimes when you're in the middle of building a business or operating a business, you don't always have the time or the ability to do this as well as you should. So obviously prepare and plan. Anticipate shocks, build flexibility. But the question that I almost always start when I have a strategy meeting with my management teams at any company I'm in, or even sort of weekly team leadership meetings, is what could possibly go wrong that we would never think of. And this is something that we talked about, especially when I was running the shell company All On, because in Nigeria, there are so many things that can go wrong, and it's usually something that can go wrong for your business, and it's usually something you never anticipated. And then when it comes, you realize, wow, I should have thought of that. So we would spend time thinking, what are the things that we aren't thinking about that could go wrong, not just the things that are obviously could go wrong. Secondly is persistence. So I have a runner there. Think of someone, it's about running a marathon. There are times when, for economic reasons, it looks like everything around is collapsing. Your business is going to go under. And there are times when you just need to hold steady and keep going long enough so you weather the storm. And then at the other end is when you can start growing. Another is pivot. And sometimes in business, economic difficulties or economic shocks force you to, maybe you're an entrepreneur with a very specific dream and vision, and you need to then at some point realize that the direction you're headed and what you thought was the opportunity is, and you need to turn in a different direction to survive the economic shocks that you're going through. And so sometimes it's important to pivot and move in a different direction. The other is partner. Again, it's relatively obvious, but by this, I don't just mean, sign MOUs and that kind of thing, but I mean have a deep network within your sector, know your competitors, but also a deep network in whatever country or geography you're operating in. And this is one that's particularly important if you're an international company operating in a country like Nigeria. There's often this misconception that, let's say you have a business model maybe in Kenya or even Ghana that maybe worked there and was successful, and then you just cut and paste it into Nigeria without partnering closely, without having senior Nigerians on your team, and senior Nigerian partners and advisors. You could end up getting it really wrong because you will get the market wrong. We have a unique market in Nigeria. Every country is like that, but I think Nigeria is particularly unique. Even what we talked about, NEPA. If you're not from Nigeria, you don't even know what that means. If you are from Nigeria and you hear the word NEPA, there's immediately 1,000 things that come through your head and a lot of darkness. And then finally, pragmatism. Sometimes you just have to, just kind of think on your feet. You have to be street smart. And again, some of this is about local knowledge. It's similar to what's under partner. It's about understanding the local environment and local knowledge, and then just sometimes saying, what, this doesn't have to be perfect. This is good enough. Let's move. Let's get going. Because if you wait for perfection and you're not pragmatic, sometimes in an economic shock that you didn't expect, it could mean the end of your business. So now I'm going to go through 6 brief case studies of different examples of where I experienced shocks in business, or someone very close to me experienced shocks, and then what the response was. So Gabriel, can you please go forward? All right. So first of all, this is a business. It was really a pretty informal business that my close friend and Joss, James Ponto, and I started in the late 1990s. It's a pretty typical kind of business that one starts. At that point, I was in graduate school. I didn't have a lot of money, but I wanted to send money home in a way that would, help my friends, but also generate a bit of revenue and growth. And so, again, not a very structured business, but we started this company and it was a small transport business. I think we owned 2 buses, a couple of pickup trucks, and a lot of motorcycles. Go back. You're going too quick. Go back to 1. Go back. Okay, there we go. Thank you. All right. So, the company was growing, revenue was decent. The Naira was relatively stable at that time. And we kept, we would earn revenue. We would then buy another vehicle. It kept growing. We were employing about a dozen people. And then a very local micro level shock happened. It's the September 2001 Christian-Muslim crisis in Jos. While most of the world remembers 9/11, when I think about 2,500 people died in the Twin Towers, 5 days ahead of that, or 4 days ahead of it, starting from the 7th of September, we had a massive sort of indigent versus, settler / Christian Muslim conflict in Jos that I think many of you remember. I was there at the time, living in Dunlami's house, staying in Dunlami's house. And in the course of that conflict, most of our drivers for our motorbikes, at that time we called them achabas. Now it's Okada, but then it was known as achaba. We had hired, most of the drivers were actually Muslims who were not indigenous to Plateau. And so in the course of the conflict, they were targeted, even though the owners of the vehicles were, James Ponto was an indigent of Plateau. And so one of them was even killed. Several were beaten. Many of the vehicles were destroyed because of the association with who the driver was. And so we had to face the brutal reality that we made a mistake, that in that particular political context, even though we were both local, we made that mistake of having drivers that we actually put them under threat because of where they were working at the time. And so sometimes you can have a lot of local knowledge and still get it wrong. But we also realized that people come first. And so we actually kind of rounded up the transport business and pivoted into something else. We then instead used whatever, we sold the remaining vehicles, whatever was left. We then reinvested it into a small little chain of these little kind of neighborhood kiosks. And that way, you could, the conflict, you could lock them up. Or you could move all the goods and the employees could easily hide, and they would be safer. And as you know, Plateau and Joss has been through basically 25 years of mid-level. Can everyone mute, please? Mid-level civil war since then. And so, even if we had tried to restart that initial transport business, it would have had to have been done in a very different way. So again, this is a shock that is unfortunately very common in Nigeria. Community conflicts that can completely wipe out whatever economic gain or whatever investments you made. And insurance is not always viable in Nigeria also. So again, these are things that can ruin a business, and you have to be very ready to pivot. And sometimes you just have to count your losses. But the most important thing is, in a situation like that, you need to make sure that in future, you learn the lessons and don't put people at risk again. Let's go to the next one, please. This is also micro level in Joss. This is in early 2000s, a group of friends and I, we all went to secondary school together in Joss. Many of the people that we invested together were all friends. Many of them are still quite known in the Nigerian business environment. Danladi Verheyen, who's now the CEO of Harad Capital, Hussam Azem, who's the owner of the Lagos Jet Ski Club that I'm sure many of you go to from time to time, and Philip Mshelbila was one of our investors. He was like a big brother and a mentor, and he's now the CEO of, I think it's still Nigeria's largest company, NLNG. So all of us got together, we pooled our money, and we set up a network of, we basically acquired a VSAT, started getting bandwidth, sold bandwidth, but also set up a network of internet cafes in Jos. This was in the early days of the kind of internet rollout in Nigeria. Within, I think, 2-3 months, we had actually doubled. Jos became highest internet penetration in all of northern Nigeria. We had 10,000 registered users. We were basically minting money. We were expanding. We were franchising. It was going incredibly well. And then we had that all too common local economic shock that we face in Nigeria, which is the follow mentality, where others just basically saw what we were doing, saw that we were making money, set up their own internet cafes, didn't actually do the economics, and cut the prices by half, meaning that we also then couldn't make money, and then they also couldn't make money because they put the price below what it was to actually serve the customer. So it really kind of ruined the market, and all that. And what's interesting is the person who was at the forefront of cutting the prices and ruining the market for himself and everyone, about 2 decades later in 2017, did the same thing in the solar sector. He was part of a coalition that was bid for utility scale solar projects across Nigeria, and there was about 10 of them that were ready to go. They'd all agreed to a tariff that they would all make money at, and it was viable, it would be bankable. And then he did a side deal with with I think the Minister of Finance at the time, and said, oh, you know what, instead of 12 cents a kilowatt hour, we'll charge 7 cents, which was actually below the cost to generate power. And so then the Minister of Finance said, okay, if you can do it at 7, everyone has to do it at 7. And it basically made all of the projects collapse. And with that, 1.2 gigawatts of potential power that would have been generated and long ago been in the Nigerian grid and would have solved some of the problems we're talking. So you sometimes have those individuals who create economic shocks just because of the way they do business and because of shady business approaches. So because of that, we had to pivot. We couldn't just depend on selling the bandwidth. We couldn't just depend on selling selling time in internet cafes. And so we pivoted to phone cards and voice over IP international calling. If you guys remember, at that point, you could only do international calls from Nitel. You had to go to an office. You had to shout. You had to wait in line, and it was very expensive. And so we basically then innovated and actually brought kind of voice over IP calling into the Nigerian market. We also raised $400,000 from UBA at the time. That was when it was Hakeem Bello Osagi. He wanted to invest in young Nigerian entrepreneurs, and so he invested in us. And then we used that money to also expand outside of Jos. But unfortunately, instead of going to other second and third tier cities in the north, we went to Abuja, which was a big mistake, and eventually it went bankrupt. So the lesson is you got to differentiate or die when you have these kinds of micro level shocks. You have to understand the true cost, but you also have to be pragmatic, and sometimes you have to shift your business model to fit. But then even in failure, in the end, it went bankrupt. But even in failure, after all these shocks that it encountered, Afro1 did end up shaping Joss's tech and music scene, and that was according to many, but including one of our early employees, Judah Baga, who became the hip hop superstar MI. And most importantly, all of us who started the company are still friends, and we learned a lot from that experience together. Okay, number 3. So now this is one that I was only tangentially involved in. All of you know Tony Alumulu. He's also born in Jos. Oh, sorry. One more thing on Afro1 I should mention. Bello Lafe, who was another employee, is listening in today. So Bello, thanks for being on, and thanks for working with us back in those days. So yeah, Tony Alumulu, also born in Jos. This is a story that's well known. He was planning to retire from being the CEO of UBA. He had risen really quickly. He had become a branch manager at 26 and so on. It's a legendary story. But then in 2010, when he was 47, so 3 years before he was going to retire, the central bank instituted a new regulation that indicated that for governance reasons, all chairmen and CEOs of banks had to retire after 10 years. So based on his service in both as CEO both of Standard Trust Bank and then UBA, he was already past the 10-year limit. And so he was basically mandated to retire something like 2 to 3 months after this regulation changed. So it was an absolute and sudden shock, not just for him, but for the whole banking sector, and of course also for United Bank of Africa, which he was the CEO of. So now, in his case, when you have that kind of sudden regulatory macro level shock, one option he could have done is just walked away and, gotten really upset and angry, and just kind of dwelled on it for a long time. But what he did instead was he accelerated the plans that he already had in place. So, well, first he pivoted, but then secondly, he had already been planning for a long time that at 50, he was going to do X, Y, and Z. And so what he did is in a 2 to 3 month period, he accelerated starting that much sooner than he had planned. And because of his planning, he was able to make that pivot very, very successfully. I was one of the beneficiaries of that. Because of that change, he hired me to then leave Nairobi and move back to Nigeria to start the Tony Alumulu Foundation. And so at the time, it seemed like that macro regulatory shock that completely sort of diverted his business plan and what his personal journey was going to be in business. It forced him into a direction that he planned for, but far earlier. And the reality is, if you think about it, is if Tony had actually instead retired at 2013, probably by then someone else would have already acquired Transcorp. And many of the other areas that Tony was able to kind of get involved in and become very successful in oil and gas and insurance and so on, it could be even in the foundation that none of those would have been as successful if he had waited 3 years. Because by 2013, then in 2015, there was the huge economic recession, Naira devaluation. And if he had only been 2 years into those new businesses rather than 5 years, perhaps the story would have been very, very different. So macro level shocks from regulation can really, really, mess you up as an entrepreneur, as a business leader, and as a business. But sometimes if you've planned well and you pivot quickly, you can actually make it turn out to your benefit. All right, number 4. So there's just 6, so we're getting there. Number 4, can you go forward, please? Okay. So Boston Consulting Group. So I'm sure you've all everyone on here has heard of McKinsey & Company and the Boston Consulting Group. They're now very strong in the Nigerian and West African market. Early in my career, I worked for McKinsey, but then in 2015, BCG hired me from working with Tony Alumulu to help them set up their Nigeria and West Africa operation. They had done their research. Nigeria was, it was a booming economy. Nigeria had, in 2014 become the largest economy in Africa. It was one of the fastest growing economies in the world, and it just seemed like it made sense. So I was hired to help them with their kind of Nigerian market expertise and my Nigerian networks. The other partners who came were both Portuguese. They had been working in Africa, but in Angola, which even though it's Africa, is a completely different market and a completely different environment. And they didn't realize how different it actually was. Now, what happened? You remember in May 2015, end of May 2015, President Buhari took over. And very quickly, I won't say who was to blame, but very quickly, Nigeria entered an economic recession. I believe oil prices also went down, and the naira went from like 150 to 500 in like 2 weeks. And this is just as we were opening the office. So if you think of any major business um, that is hiring high cost, strategy consultants like McKinsey and BCG, in a time of economic uncertainty, the first thing they do is they stop hiring expensive consultants. And so here we were, we just set up the office, we just hired local consultants, we just renovated, spent all this money on a new office facility on Bordelon or near Bordelon, or on Kingsway, sorry. And then suddenly the economy fell out from under us, and it was as if, okay, wow, we're gonna have to, this thing is gonna close in a few months. But what we did instead is we persisted, knowing that, look, these are cycles, it's going to get better. We got all of the local consultants that we'd hired to be on remotely working on international projects. So they still learned and we still generated revenue. We then also used networks, particularly my personal networks, to secure work in places that McKinsey had not had networks in and not had access to. So we actually did state level strategies for both Taraba and Plateau states because of my relationship with those state governors. And that then helped launch us. But then also we did, even in the midst of that uncertainty, we did a very high profile office launch and did a lot of PR to kind of show this sort of image of strength and resilience in spite of the economic crisis. And because of that, others now came on board and said, hey, look, these guys seem to be confident. They know what they're doing. Let's hire them and let's work with them. And now BCG has a very strong presence in Nigeria. They've outgrown that office and they're operating from Lagos, covering clients across West Africa. So next. All right, so now we're to the solar space. So as you know, I spent 5 years running the company All-On, which was a Shell subsidiary, and our focus was on investing in solar companies in the Nigerian market. And the first company that we invested in, this was in 2017. It was early on, and when you're a new investment fund, you actually need to do a deal early just to show the market that you're serious. So it wasn't the perfect deal, but we realized, look, this is the most ready company. Let's do it. So we invested in Lumos. Lumos was an Israeli company, and they had brought the solar home system business model, which had been perfected in Kenya, and they brought it into Nigeria. So the companies that were doing this in Kenya, they were not Kenyan-run companies. These were foreign-owned companies in Kenya. And as you know, a lot of companies like that start in Kenya, and then they're afraid of Nigeria, so they never come to Nigeria. If they come to West Africa, maybe they go to Ghana, which I think is Austin's other country, because Ghana is sort of West Africa light, but they don't come to Nigeria. So the Nigerian market was open. Lumos took the risk. They came in. Initially, they grew really fast, but the problem is they kept most of the leadership and most of the decision making in Israel, even though Nigeria was 95% of their market or of their sales. And so what that meant is that the overhead cost was really high, the R&D cost was really high, and there was no reason why all of that couldn't just have been moved to Nigeria and done from Nigeria. But they kept doing it that way, and so eventually they just had too high cost of a model, and they just, they had raised about $100 million and essentially became more like a lending company, but they had contracts denominated in Naira that as the Naira devalued, they couldn't change. And so, the 100 million kept going down in value. And as far as I know, they might still be in the market in Nigeria, but they were the market leaders at the time. But I don't even know how strong or even if they exist anymore. So then about 2 years later, we invested in another young entrepreneur, initially with just a $50,000 angel investment. And I think, All-On has now done 2 or 3 more investments in the company. It was Salfa Energy, run by Sandra Dozier. So she's actually on the call today also. When I'm done talking, she's going to speak for 2 to 3 minutes about how she weathered the shocks and used her market knowledge to kind of become the market leader. So she used a combination of pragmatism and partnership. She understood the Nigerian market as a Nigerian businesswoman. She had a family business network that she could leverage then to localize some of the assembly and manufacturing of the equipment. But then she also had the great idea to use Igbo trading networks across Nigeria to get her products into every corner of the country in a way that a foreign company like Lumos would never have understood. And so while Lumos was kind of running out of money and getting into economic trouble, Sandra was just growing and growing and growing. And she's now an award-winning entrepreneur. And she'll, again, like I said, talk a little bit about it and about how much they've expanded into the market. So they've gone through all of these, further currency devaluations and all these other issues, and succeeded because of her local networks and local knowledge and local pragmatism. All right, so the last and final one. All right, so here we are. So this is the last and final one. Again, this is from Allon, the Shell investment company I was running. One thing that we discovered, this is around 2020, 2021. We had all these investments in solar companies in Nigeria. By then, we probably had 40 to 45 companies in our portfolio, and every single one of the companies had the same couple of issues. One was they were all importing, their solar panels or most of their equipment from China, but just individually, which meant they were not getting economies of scale. They weren't getting discounts, and they were paying a really high price. Secondly, they were all basically losing on currency, both when they received their investments in dollars and had to transfer them into Naira at the CBN rate, and then when they had to basically buy dollars back to pay for the equipment, pay for the imports on the black market rate. And as we know, that was a huge spread. And so that was just devastating them. And then finally, there was actually a law on the books in Nigeria that if you were importing solar products, they should come in VAT and duty free. But when you just come in with one container and you're one small company, the customs guys would just shake you down and they would just not give you that discount. So what we did is we partnered with the Rockefeller Foundation, and we set up a program called DART, which was the Demand Aggregation for Renewable Technology, DART. And what it was is it was initially a $15 million facility that basically we would aggregate the purchasing of all the companies in Nigeria that wanted to be part of it, not just our own portfolio companies. And then we would basically order as one, and so they would get bulk orders, which means all of the prices went down. The import cost, the transportation cost to Nigeria would also be lower because of the volume. We would actually use our own dollars and buy the equipment abroad, and then they would actually be taking a loan from us in Naira so that they didn't have to go through those currency issues. And then because of our scale, we were also able to then force customs to also give the tax rebates. So we very quickly were able to basically bring the costs down of all of these solar companies by something like 30 to 40%, which was obviously a significant saving. And without that, I think the industry would have been strangled and would have struggled to continue. So again, the approach there was, how did we manage through the shocks, the currency shocks, the regulatory shocks, everything else, was through partnership, and then also preparing and planning for that aggregation. So we used deep local knowledge and an understanding of how the system worked to aggregate all these companies together and help solve problems collectively. So those are the 6 case studies I wanted to talk about, related to the 5 Ps of surviving economic wahala. This is kind of a table that summarizes it all. I think I may have run over time, so I won't go into this in detail. I think Austin and team will probably share this with everyone. But again, let's go to the final slide. It's just a basically reiteration of what I started with. Prepare and plan, persist, pivot, partner, and be pragmatic. And there will be ways that you will be able to survive and win in the Nigerian market, while Oyibo companies and others will struggle. So thank you very much. And so Sandra, Gabriel, if you can let Sandra Dozier speak briefly. Over to you, Sandra.
Can you give Sandra a video share as well, please, so that we can see Sandra?
Okay.
Sandra, are you there?
Yeah, I'm here. Can you hear me?
But we can't see you. If you prefer not to show on video, please go ahead.
It's unable to start the video. But let me just, I can't share my video because it's not working.
It's working now. You can share. It's working now.
Oh, there we go. Okay.
Hi, good evening, everyone. Happy Independence. So I think I love the poll that was shared, because that poll was very informative about what exactly in Africa, in Nigeria, is the biggest issue around the infrastructure. and its power. And I'm the CEO of Salfa Energy. And when I reflect on the power issue, globally, people get excited. Oh, we have this gap and we need to close this gap. And so many companies focus on trying to deploy solutions. When we were crafting Salfa, I think the way we looked at it was the solar industry to capture access to energy had never been created before. We had to create that market. And when you're creating a market, it's important to look at the technology. So, for example, lots of the tech that we had for solar was being imported. And our goal was to essentially bring that value chain back into the country through local assembly. Otherwise, we would be importing high costs in pricing, and the quality as well will not be assured. The other part is distribution. To be able to reach millions of people at scale, it's important to have partnerships like Wiebe mentioned. And what was key for us was two things: partnership at the distributor level, really looking at entrepreneurs within Lagos, within Kano, the big markets, for example. And then beyond that, the fact that the currency devalued and people's incomes remained as they were, the biggest issue was how could people afford this solution? And so we began to pitch a lot of financiers to position solar as an investable asset class where they could provide loans to households and businesses. Essentially, they would take up that credit risk, provide them with solar loans. They buy solar systems from my company. However, the bank is the one that holds the liability or the receivable. In that way, my company was able to scale across so many geopolitical zones and states, and at the same time, be able to avoid taking on credit risk. I don't have much time, but through the supports of financiers, for example, like Allon, I think when we're in Nigeria, it's also important to align financing that is patient, but also understands the local context. And that was very instrumental in being able to enable us from 2021, when Allon put in $1 million, up to 2025. The company grew 100% year-over-year growth, profitable, and also in terms of being able to have that local value chain domesticated, it did that. So I think these three things, local innovation in terms of assembly, distribution, and patient capital, was very vital into what helped Salfa be where it is. Thank you.
Sandra, thank you very much for this share. And Wiebe, thank you very much. I mean, I could go on listening to you on and on and on. I forgot that we had a time limit. I was just listening and imbibing. But the things that struck me is insurance. Many of us do not insure, just to even leverage risk. And I mean, I had a car in Nigeria, which picked me up from the airport whenever I came in, and I thought it was insured. The car had an accident, it was a write-off, and the insurance on that car was 2.5 million naira payout. On the market, that same car was about 30 million naira. So I've lost so much, and I think many people lose a lot because they don't insure. Competing by price, race to the bottom. I mean, the guy did it twice in power and in, you just have to look for something more than price to compete on. Wiebe, you said you went bankrupt. I didn't even know you went bankrupt. I've always been so scared of bankrupt. Oh,
Not
twice.
me personally, but my companies, yeah.
Well, it's you. Twice. I think we have to put you in a room with Mr. Donald Trump so that people can discuss bankruptcy.
No, please don't. Yeah.
And then you talked about companies that want to come into West Africa and then they'll go to Ghana instead of Nigeria. So there's a company we consult for in Kenya. It's actually manufacturing, Hako. And they wanted my help.
Which one, Hako?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, they make big pens and so on, right?
Correct. And
Yeah.
Amara and so on. You know them.
Okay. Yeah.
And they were looking for my help to go into Ghana. And I said, but have you tried Nigeria? They said, no, we're not going to Nigeria. And I said, why? It's a bigger market. I thought, well, against better sense, they've set up in Ghana. The lady just sent me a message 3 days ago and asked me, how is it going with Dangote and the unions? And I just kept quiet. There was no answer I could give her again. So we have to be careful how we posture to foreigners that want to invest. Is their investment safe? Are they going to be hijacked, etc.? But nonetheless, I think we're ready to launch our fourth poll because we're going to be going into business now. Gabriel, can you launch poll number 4? How do I feel about my business?
Yes, coming.
It's coming from where? I can't see it.
From Zoom.
Okay, from Zoom. All right. How do I feel about my business? I think this will be very revealing from what I can see. All right. So, well, they're still coming in. I wanted to launch the result, but the votes are still coming. Some people are still thinking. Gabriel, I think we have a representative number. Wow, it's still coming fast and thick. But I'll launch the results so that we can save some time.
Yes, sir.
Sandra, are you there? Are you still on video, Sandra? Are you with us, Sandra?
Hello?
Okay, Sandra, can you help us to be the INEC chairman for this polling station? What do you see?
Sorry, I can't see anything.
You can't see anything. Who can see? Juliet, can you see?
I could, but it's gone now.
It's gone.
I
All right.
did before when I
Good.
saw it last time. It was at 67. It's now 73%.
Oh, you got it. Okay.
Say the business is growing. 22%. That's 8 people out of 37 say it's plateaued, and then 2 people say it's declining. Okay.
So all in all, people's business is growing. I mean, the vast majority, which is 73, is growing, and then 27 is either plateaued or declining. So sometimes you need to really do a research or poll to know what the temperature is. Because if you go by hearsay, it's as if, oh, everything is going down, my business is, but that's not what we're seeing here, Anyway, we learn every day. I'm going to be speaking very quickly about a few things that I think will give some context and maybe some insight from my own experience. And I think the first one is winning at the turns. Entrepreneurs like to win in the turns. Why? Because they think like race drivers. If you've been for car races, the drivers overtake in the curves or in the turns. Because on the straight road, everybody's foot is firmly on the accelerator. It's difficult to accelerate, to overtake. But when you get into those rough edges, the turns, then all the adventures happen. In history, there's been so many of such turns. Y2K, I don't know how many people were old enough to know about Y2K. We've had Fourth Industrial Revolution. We have GSM Advent, on which fintech is built. We have bank consolidation. Many people made money, many also did not. Then you had COVID. And there are so many of such systemic events that change the hierarchy in many industries. But let me share a story about CWG and winning at the turns. I don't know how many people remember June 12, 1993, when elections were canceled. The whole country went into comatose. There were riots. Interests were running. Businesses were not transacting, but the interests were running. Many businesses actually did not survive. But then, look at it from another angle. So imagine we are going into the mango season. Maybe Wiebe may know about mango season. There's a lot of mango in Apanga there, near to Jos. And the tree looks promising, a lot of fruit. The farmer comes and he sees that there is a very gusty wind that has blown a lot of the fruits down and they are not matured. So now you have very few mangoes on the tree. What then happens to those few mangoes? I think the answer is obvious. They are going to be very big mangoes because there are very few mangoes that are benefiting from all the nutrients from the tree that was meant for so many mangoes that were no longer there. And that's how it is with businesses. Whenever there are rough times, you find that those businesses that are able to ride through it, they come out much stronger. Imagine companies that we never knew about that came out of the pandemic stronger. Companies like Zoom, Netflix, people were at home just watching videos. Yesterday, I tried to watch my Netflix and it gave me a message. I couldn't sleep until I got it to start working. Then I didn't watch it again, but I just wanted to be sure that it was there. It's like an addiction. And so the Chinese expression for challenge is like door to opportunity. The characters writing challenge translates to door to opportunity. So challenge and opportunity are two sides of the same coin. Sometimes opportunities come disguised as challenges. And I could see that the result of the poll, bore us out on this. When times are rough, remember what Juliet said. Fold the paper, squeeze the paper. Make sure that you are one of those mangoes that survives the storm, so that you'll be a very big mango that can command maximum price. I'm going to speak briefly about something that many of you may have a different attitude to, and I'm going to launch a poll first before I talk about it. Gabriel, launch poll number 5 on artificial intelligence. And the question is simple. What is my attitude to artificial intelligence? Okay, this one is going very fast. The results are quite shocking. Okay, very interesting. Gabriel, can you launch the results? They are still coming in, but this is representative. Launch the results, Gabriel.
It's there, sir. I've done that.
All right, Wiebe, what do you see? I don't know whether you know much about artificial intelligence.
Yeah, I do. Yeah, it's 88% say it's optimizing my work. I think it's a clear sign. Again, I mean, this seems to be a very optimistic crowd and so on. And part of that optimism is likely being able to use AI to just speed everything that you do up. Only 0% said it will take my job. 7% said I'm indifferent, and 5% said I distrust it. And nobody indicated it will intensify cybercrime.
How do you feel about this result? Does it reflect your own imagination, Wiebe?
Well, I mean, I think it seems like the audience we have is skewed towards people who are probably younger, entrepreneurial, optimistic, and are just like, that they've weathered so much wahala in Nigeria that, like, if AI can sort some things out, fantastic, and everyone is very happy about where they are. And again, like the Nigerian opportunity, in spite of all the wahala, if you do it right, our economy is less than 500 billion, right? But we should be at 1, 2, 3 trillion. So every sector you're in, is almost an infinite growth opportunity if you get it right. So I do think that we have an audience here that's skewing towards the people who are on that side of optimism. So,
Juliet, any thoughts to share?
No, I mean, I'm happy to see that there's more. Yeah, I mean, of course, you hear the negative aspects of AI. Today, I was listening to a podcast and I talked about the lethal trifecta of AI, which is about the fact that it not only has the capacity to read through your data and be able to analyze your data, but it also has the capacity, because give it the right, someone can introduce a wrong prompt in the middle of data, and then all of a sudden you find that all your personal details are exposed. But despite that, there is a huge opportunity there, and I really, really like to see that. I was so excited to hear about, I mean, young Nigerians who are using platforms like Orders to launch their new businesses. Orders basically allows you to be an entrepreneur with no staff. So you kick off very lean and really stress test your business case before you then get to a point where you start to, to hire your first employees and so on and so forth. So many people are using different kinds of applications. I'm so excited to see that we all think that is a potential there. Then again, I still say there is a little bit of caution in terms of how you use it, especially how you expose proprietary data to open applications like AI. Yeah, thank you.
Well, you will know, Jumia. You will know you were the MD of Jumia. You are more a tech guru than many. So I was quite surprised that nobody felt that to intensify cybercrime, but maybe we'll leave that for another day. So let me talk about learning, unlearning, and relearning. Nothing is as constant as change. Learning is actually a journey. It's not a destination. I'm learning. I've learned so much from Juliet and Wiebe's presentations. But we have to keep on learning, unlearning, and relearning. Only the adaptive will survive. It's not just about learning to know something. It's rather about being adept at learning how to learn. Let it not be tedious. Learning how to learn. How many of us have taken the effort to understand artificial intelligence and how we can leverage it? I can see that a lot of Wiebe says maybe our audience is young. I'll ask everybody to put their age now on their screen so we'll see. But people obviously are using it, and I need to do a course. There are so many courses now. And because with the ubiquity of broadband, with proliferation of mobile phones, with the rise in technology platforms, the whole space has been democratized. As Juliet said, you start a company, you don't need a whole marketing team. When we started CWG, you had to go and queue at the newspapers to place an ad, you pay through your nose. Today, you can put something on your Instagram page and everybody sees it. So the playing field is now level. You don't have to compete with the deep pockets of large companies to launch, to advertise, or even to acquire customers. So please do
Austin, if I may interject, there's a phrase for it. I share that on my podcast. I call it digital only AI first. So you can actually be a digital only AI first company for a while. It can give you so much runway until you get to a point where you absolutely need to be careful about hiring and adding headcount. But you can get a long distance. You can go a long distance just using AI tools. Yeah. Thank you.
Can we ask you to put your podcast in the chat box so that people who want to join that podcast to listen to digital, sorry, I've even forgotten, AI first digital or something like that. We will.
So Austin, something interesting in the chat, people are talking about that if they had two options that they could pick, obviously it's going to increase crime and cybercrime also, but they just could only pick the first one. So I think you should also note that.
So Wiebe, we will leave you to help us with the chat box, because otherwise they will be neglected, and they're a very important part of our discussion. I'm finding it difficult to concentrate on both. So Wiebe, anything comes into the chat box, stop me and then bring it to our attention. May we charge you with that?
Yes, sir.
Right. Okay, so what you have is that the big companies, they're like big ships. It takes a very long distance to turn 1 meter. They have the advantage of history and longevity. But small companies, they have the agility of speedboats, and they can speed, turn quickly, overtake. Use it to your advantage. Stop complaining in spite of. Don't give any excuses. Wherever you want to use the sentence because of, replace it with in spite of, and see how far you will go. Many people feel that AI is coming for their jobs. The reality is that it's people who have AI knowledge that are applying for your job and getting it. To defend your turf, you also need to get that AI knowledge and use it for your own job. Already, many of our audience are using it to optimize their work. Juliet is doing the same. Wiebe and I need to go and attend Juliet's course. Maybe we'll keep our jobs. All right, let me switch gears and talk about competencies. So I have a model, I won't go deep into it. It's called the multi-competencies to save costs and aid succession. The gist is very simple. Many times people join a company and they join with a skill, say accounting, and they stay on that skill until they retire. Today's world, we cannot afford that. If you join with accounting, that is, you are an I person. You need to quickly transit to become a T person. So your core is accounting, but you need to learn some element of sales. So that's a T person. Over time, if you're getting promoted to ESCO, you need to graduate to become an H person. So you came with accounting, you know technology, but you need to, you know sales. You need to learn the technology of what you're doing as well. You know, you have the H person, so that when someone is not able, another person can cover his beat because he knows it. You know, so we leverage on each other, we save costs. There are some people that are four-sided. They are accounting, their sales, their technology, their another thing. Entrepreneurs tend to be all-rounders. You can't tell where one skill starts and the other ends. So if there are any I persons on this call, when you leave this call, quickly go and acquire one more skill, be a T person. The minimum in this environment that will save the company is an H person. There are some people that are Foursquare, some people are all round, but H is I think the minimum. And I think that's where we need to look at how to leverage on on how we are going to be efficient. I wanted to, Gabriel, do you have my presentation? Can you go to page 1 of my presentation? I want to use it to illustrate something.
Okay,
I hope Gabriel has not abandoned us.
not at all.
So what I'm going to explain is called the 4-door panel principle for innovative thinking. And you can see there, that's the 4-door panel. Can you go into presentation mode? So have you ever wondered where out of the blue ideas like Uber, like drones, AI, Airbnb, Netflix, Spotify, where did they come from? And I'll explain to you my thoughts on that. Consider that there are 4 panels on a door. So you can see the 4 panels. The first panel is the zone where you know things about yourself that the computer doesn't know about you. So no surprises here. You can only manage incremental growth. Now consider the second panel. This is where you know things about yourself that the competitor does not know about you. So the first one, what you know about yourself, your competitor knows as well. The second one, you know about yourself, the competitor does not know. So you take advantage of the situation. You can surprise your competitor and you can steal a competitive advantage. But it gets interesting when you get into the third panel, where the competition knows something about you that you have not come to the realization of. For instance, you have an anchor customer who brings you 80% of your business, and it happens. I've seen it happen. And the competitor knows that that customer is no longer happy with you, your services, maybe insurance renewal. And quietly he goes and snatches that customer away. So there, the competitors can surprise you. The most interesting is the fourth panel. The fourth panel where there are things that you and the competitor have not realized about your industry. The one who thinks outside the box and charts a new trail to these big ideas is the one who surprises his industry and is the one that leaves the competition flat-footed. Think about Safaricom and M-Pesa. We thought that banking was about bigness, it was about trust, it was about big offices. Comes M-Pesa and is the biggest bank in Kenya. So what happened? And this person could be you, but it requires what we call passionate intensity and a very strong resolve. But it rests on relentless execution, Paystack, Fifth Lab by CWG, Money Point, OPay, and then Sandra's company, Salsa, Salfa, they just come at you from panel 4. If you operate in panel 1 and 2 and 3, in fact, panel 3 is where you should not even operate at, where your competitor can suppress you. But spend a lot of your time in panel 4. Think about the things that do not yet exist, that are problems to be solved. Don't be the copycat person that Wiebe Boer talked about that halves prices all the time, because that's a race to the bottom. So let me talk about something else that I see that young entrepreneurs need to know, and that's called the cycle of enterprise. You can see from here, let me see if I can illustrate, that they say everything rises and falls on leadership. In my selling career, I'll tell you that everything rises and falls on sales. Because sales gives you revenue. Revenue provides the margin, and it's from that margin that the CEO is paid. It's from that margin that we declare dividend. It's from that margin that we do marketing, and the marketing provides a brand. So it should actually be marketing before the brand. And because of your brand, you get more sales. What is the problem here? The critical component is sales, and is the component that people shy away from. People don't want to go knocking on doors. If you look at Juliet, you're in America, election period, people come knocking on your doors. The people that are contesting for positions, they don't stay in their office and blast emails and WhatsApp and hope that they'll get the votes. And it's the same with sales. You can't just blast Instagram and every place selling complex solutions. Nobody is going to buy. They'll read it and then they'll file it. But you have to make sales. People confuse marketing with sales. They are different. Marketing is about spending money to build a brand, but you need money to spend in order to build a brand. And that's where sales comes in, because it's the revenue from sales that provides the margin. The hard work is sales. Some people acquire customers by selling below price, as happened with the case that Wiebe said. If it's a strategy to acquire customers and then normalize pricing later, so it's a loss leader. But if that's what you want to do perpetually, business is not going to be sustainable. And I've spent so much time because I think that sales is where we miss it. Many companies go under after 2 years of launch. They'll do Series A, Series B, Series C. Once the series stop coming, the company dies. And a lot have happened in Nigeria. Look for the answer in sales. They are not making sales. They are not making enough sales to cover the operations. Let me talk a bit about, Gabriel, stay where you are. I'm not going anywhere yet. Stay where you are. Go back. I'll tell you when to move. So let me talk a bit about going where you are valued. You are in harmony and in your most productive space, where that space is, you're so passionate about it that you even do it if you are not paid. The footballers get a lot of money, professional footballers in Premier League, whether they play or they don't play. Once you're signed, you're given a contract. But look at the look on their faces when they are left on the bench or when where they are substituted. They feel very hurt. They just want to play. Some people take a pay cut and go and play for Real Madrid because they are in their zone of passion. No matter how wonderful you are, you cannot thrive when you are in the wrong environment and when you are not in your zone of passion. So I would say, learn the skills that will elevate you. Make sure you are in your zone of passion, but you must be in the environment that values you. Sometimes the organization that you are working in, you've acquired more skills, but they're slow to realize that you've acquired those skills and therefore to put you in a position to leverage those skills and to pay you commensurately. And then you have to look at it and ask yourself, is this environment valuing me, or do I have to do some other action? So if you look at football, if you follow soccer, there was a player called Cole Palmer, fantastic player. He proved to Man City that he could play. He came from the academy. I watched him on the earlier matches, fantastic lad. But it became clear to him that he was going to be sitting on the bench at Man City. He left to Chelsea, and today he's a talisman of Chelsea. What decision would you have made if you were Cole Palmer? So the next one I want to talk about is the power of the network. I think you should build a network, and I'm not saying gather contacts into your phone. Interact with your network. Value your network and mine it. A network is as good as money, but a solid network is built on track record of trust. If you don't come out as a person of candor, people will not take your second call. It's your network that speaks for you in your absence and in critical moments. I think someone has a story to tell about this. They came to the ALA Academy to talk. Maybe it was Juliet or maybe someone else. But it's important that you nurture and value your network and mind your network. A lot of time, we believe that there's not enough money. I mean, there was a maintenance guy that came to my house, and after he finished doing what he did in Ghana cedis, I think I gave him 500 Ghana cedis. Each Ghana cedis have 120 now, so you can calculate. And he's working for other people. But yet, I look at him and I said, Moses, what do you do with your money? They make much more money than people work in the office, but they split. And those of us in the office, we do the same. Every weekend, chillos. Is it kilos or chillos? I don't know the right pronunciation. But when I was younger, I found someone that gave me an advice. Often, whatever you do, do not run out of money. It's called DROM, D-R-O-M. Do not run out of money. To ensure you do not run out of money, spend 1/3 of what you make, save 1/3 of what you make, and invest 1/3 of what you make. If you cut your clubbing to once in 2 weeks instead of once every weekend, you will be surprised at how much money you will be saving. So, Gabriel, go to the next slide. And this slide, if you are quick, you can go with me. If you are not quick, just look at it on the screen. I want you, if you have a phone, to pick up that phone, go to Google and look for an application called Compound Interest Calculator. Compound Interest Calculator. It's there, but many people don't know about it. When you find it, step 1, initial investment, put in 1 million naira. This is the money you use for kilos in the quarter, buying champagne and so on, 1 million naira. Step 2, it will ask you for monthly contribution. Not too ambitious, just put in 10,000 naira. Then step 3 is going to ask you length of time. Put in 25 years. Step 4 is going to ask you what is the interest rate. Fixed deposit, 18%. Step 5 is going to ask you compound frequency, put annually. and then hit calculate. If you did exactly that, your closing amount will be 103.8 million naira. If you work in a company for 25 years, your retirement will not be as much as this. So you can use this as a balance to whatever the company will give you as retirement. Don't be helpless. Do not run out of money. Do not run out of money for any reason. Help yourself. The last one I'm going to talk about is investing. Gabriel, next slide. So savings is different from investing because in savings is money that is there for you when you need it. Risk is low, but investment is a bit higher, the risk, but high returns, high risk. I have a friend who invested 10 million naira in CWG shares and convinced his dad to invest 20 million naira in CWG shares. Now, this was at 30th September. If you look at the bottom, date is 30th of September. This is Financial Times keeps a track on CWG PLC Nigeria, Lagos. And you see that 1 year change is 173% in 1 year. So that, my friend, his 10 million he's invested has become 30 million about, and his dad's 20 million that was invested has become 60 million. That family have generated 80 million from us in Okere. They have not given me a penny and have not asked for it. So don't save all your money, invest some. Spend 1/3, save 1/3, and invest 1/3. These are the few thoughts I wanted to share with you. And I think the time is fast spent, but we may be here to take as many questions until you yourself want to go, then we'll all go. So David, over to you. Questions time.
Well, Austin, the Arsenal match starts at 3 p.m., so many of us will have to leave in 18 minutes. I'm just kidding. All right.
No, we are going to watch that match. Not only watch it, but win it. So please, everybody should be at the stadium. David,
right.
question
All right.
time.
Thank you, Wiebe. Thank you, Juliet. Thank you, Ao, for this amazing time. There's been a lot of learning points, quite a lot for me to take home from here. So everyone, we will just have questions. I hope we can do this in 15 minutes. So I'm going
No, we
to
should give them more time. They've come all the way. We should give them more time.
All right.
At least 30.
With the special grace of Mr. Okere, we're going to give more time. All right, so I'm going to take questions from the chat box if we have some. But if you have a question that you want to ask, I think we should give that opportunity. Just indicate with the hand sign, and I'm going to call you. So I would suggest that we'll take maybe a group of 5 questions. I would love the questionnaires to ask the specific question. Let's avoid a lot of talk so that we'll give time for other people to ask. Then, if possible, I would appreciate if you can reference your question to the speaker that you want to answer. But if not, you could make it a general questions and all speakers will attempt it. All right. While that happens, I will look at the chat box for questions. So do we have people who want to ask questions? Please indicate now.
There's one on the chat box already.
Okay. Okay, so there's a question from KO. It says, great presentation from all speakers so far. My question, 1, to Juliet. What personal habits or mindsets help leaders remain steady and decisive in turbulence? The question to Wiebe is, how can founders on the call balance short-term survival with long-term growth ambitions? And the question to Austin is, what's one counterintuitive strategy that works surprisingly well during recession? I'm sure we can all see the questions in the chat box as well, so I don't need to read again. So while we wait for other questions, let's start with that.
Okay, since mine is first, I can start. To answer this question, I always have to give credit to someone who was extremely influential in my career and the early stages, and that's my former country managing director when I was at Accenture, Dotun Suleiman. Every time I say this, he smiles, but he really was influential. Dotun was always unflappable, no matter what the situation was. I mean, it doesn't matter what is happening and how turbulent it is. He always managed to keep a calm mind and be able to then, without any adrenaline running through his system, be able to just assess the situation and figure out what's the next thing that he needs to do. I had the privilege of training under him. And I think as I started to also be in leadership positions, particularly if I'll share the example of when I was in Jumia. One of the things we used to do then, of course, we used to launch Black Friday. It was always a very hectic, very turbulent launch days. We will start at midnight. I'm sure most people didn't know that we will start those things at midnight. At midnight, we would launch it. And then suddenly you have that the system, the platform is overwhelmed because you're having hundreds of millions of people from all over logging on to be able to get the best deals, and the system will crash. Okay. And then between 2 a.m. and 4 a.m. is a scramble because we're trying to figure out what next to do and how do we manage the situation. So, and here I am, I'm in the launch room. We used to call it war room in those days. So I'm in the war room and I have like 50 people who are looking up to me and trying to say, okay, so what do we do now? How do we handle the situation? So taking that lesson from Dotso in those moments was extremely helpful because I could sort of like elevate myself beyond what was happening. The marketing guys, the creative guys, the guys who are talking to sellers and all the turbulence that's going around me, and just stay calm and say, okay, what next? What do we do? And sometimes what next to do is, okay, everybody go to bed. Okay. And we start again in the morning. Okay. So that being, having the ability to just, separate yourself from the turbulence and just take a walk. Okay. During COVID, that helped me so much. In the middle of I'll finish a call at 1 p.m. and 2 p.m. I'll just go out and take a walk. It'd be hot and uncomfortable, but that ability to just see something else, see the trees, see the flowers, see the birds, something that's completely divorced from whatever it is I was dealing with at that point in time, was extremely valuable for me in handling situations at that time. So I just want to share this one particular one about just keeping the head steady. It can be extremely difficult, but it sure helps to, it really helped me a lot stay on balance. Okay.
Thank you so much, Juliet. Wiebe, you need to unmute your mic. We can't hear you.
Yes. All right. So, Keo,
Awesome.
those are great questions. Yeah, the question you asked me is how can founders on the call balance short-term survival with long-term growth ambitions? I mean, I think that's a whole masterclass by itself. But just to say quickly, I mean, the main thing is, okay, first of all, if you're a founder, that means you firmly believe in yourself and your idea. But remember that you're not the only one who's going to believe in that idea. Or you may be the only one that believes in it. So you have to really be ready to suffer a lot of, no rejection, etc. But you also have to be ready to kind of pivot and so on if that idea is not as good as you think it is. But you also have to be very frugal. You got to remember that every naira that you spend unnecessarily, either your own or that you've raised from others, is one naira that isn't going to help build your business, right? And so we would often find if someone would roll into all on in a convoy of expensive SUVs, and then they'd come in and ask us for a couple $100,000, we would just be like, okay, but just sell your cars and you have the money. So as a founder, you have to make sure, even if you raise $1 million, let's say $1 million, don't use that to now, buy equip this really nice office and furnish it. Like still, when we started After One, I was literally my desk GM, I was like 22, was an empty computer box. That was my desk. And even and I was sleeping on Dunlami's couch, and I was I was just taking equity because I had a small stipend for my graduate. I was actually supposed to be doing graduate research. I had a Fulbright fellowship. So, but you just try and squeeze out everything you can, live frugally. If you raise your million, don't then suddenly buy better, have flashy clothes, flashy cars, travel in first class. You'll blow the money so fast. You also have to have a laser focus on what you're trying to do and not get distracted. Don't get distracted by panels. You often have the other thing we would look at is if an stage entrepreneur, we saw them on a panel for every energy event everywhere in the world, then we'd be like, I'm not going to invest in them. They're not serious. They're focusing on they're panelpreneurs. They're not actually entrepreneurs. So just focus on your business, make decisions quick. If you're in a fundraise and you feel like you're being led along, then just stop the conversation, pivot to the next opportunity. So again, everything has to be decisive focus. You have to be ready to live, very cheaply, very humbly, etc. And then all of those sacrifices, yes, it's still possible your business fails, but it's more likely that it will succeed and that people will back you over time.
Thank you so much, Wiebe, for that succinct answer. Mr. Okere, you can go ahead.
David, this is a very interesting question. What's one counterintuitive strategy that works surprisingly well during recession? It's contrarian because I did it without knowing that I was doing it. I was providing skills to my competitors and I was providing skills to my customers. After the OBJ election to 1999, when we went back to civilian rule, there was a lot of interest by foreign companies to come in. Hitherto now, they will stay in South Africa, well reporting to South Africa. They just didn't want to come to Nigeria. But with the opening of the economy, all of them came in. And of course, they wanted staff. And they couldn't wait to train staff. So that's where they went to. I saw adverts in the newspaper, CWG staff, please apply. And they raided us. There was nothing we could do. I never said because of. I said, okay, great, what do we do? So I started what we call the CWG Academy. And in the CWG Academy, we took everybody. You didn't have to be a computer science graduate. We took everybody. The only criteria is the character. Because we look at 3 C's: character, competence, and commitment. Competence and commitment. Competence we can teach you. Commitment if you like the place you stay. But character was the key thing. And we brought these people in and put them into a pressure cooker for 3 months. By the time they finish from the academy, we'll put them onto a job. You won't be able to differentiate between them and people, that have been there for a long time, because young people learn technology very quickly. And so we were graduating at that time. I think we're doing 50 in a quarter, and we needed only 10%. So where did the rest go? They went to our competitors. They went to our customers. And that's how we had balance in the technology industry. People don't know this, that sometimes helping your competitors and helping your customers is helping yourself. And that's how the idea of the ALA, the Ausso Leadership Academy, came to be. Because I've done it already in CWG and I know it works very well. So I know that if I take a group of rookies and put them into a framework, they'll come out to be better business people. They'll come out to be better entrepreneurs. They'll scale their businesses. The end point for me is shared prosperity. So I know that if they scale their businesses, they will employ more people will have jobs, they will feed themselves, they will not run out of money. Not everybody will say, Uncle, find me 10,000, find me 20,000, because you teach them how to fish, they can feed themselves. So there you go, that's your answer.
Yeah, thank you so much, Austin, for that. Just another quick question for you from Paul Adeyinka. And it says, Austin, I invest 10 to 15% of my salary every month, but you said 1/3, which is about 33%. How realistic is that in this economy? Yeah, you can
So
go.
my answer to that, and I've got that question many times, how realistic is this economy? it's a journey. It's not a destination. It's a habit you learn. So when I started, I was like you. I was one of the first out of my youth corps to buy a car. I bought a car 18 months after I finished youth corps. Then I was invited to every party. In fact, I didn't even know I was a glorified driver. So things were moving very fast. And I was spending money, but at the end of the day, I was always broke, but have savings. It was when I met my fiance. We used to go to a restaurant every night. She said, "Don't you have cooking pots?" I said, I have some 3 or 4. She bought a whole set and she started cooking at home. Then I realized that I was saving a lot of money. Restaurants are very expensive. A bottle of water in a shop, maybe 15 naira, maybe 500 or 1,500 in the restaurant. So my point being what? Is the habit, is not the amount. If 15% is what you can do for the minute, do that. Cultivate the habit. Once you have the habit, it's automatic what you put away, what you invest, and what you spend. But one key lesson is always live in your last year's salary. Every year they raise the salaries, sometimes by just the cost of living, sometimes you get a promotion. Always be sure to live in your last year's salary, not in your current year's salary, because that gives you a boost to the savings and investment. I hope that answers your question.
Awesome. Thank you so much. Juliet or Wiebe, I don't know if you want to make a thought on that.
I think you covered
the
it. Yeah.
saving, I think it's covered it here. Yeah. I think if there was anything I wanted to add is on the question of mindset. I think sometimes as leaders and as entrepreneurs, we take ourselves way too seriously. And so when things go awry, when things go belly up, we people have had strokes just because of challenging times and all that. And I think it's very important for us to know that, look, you are responsible for doing everything that you possibly can, but you're actually not responsible sometimes for the outcome. I'm not sure a lot of people know that a good decision is not determined by the outcome. You can make a perfectly good decision, but then the outcome just doesn't work right. Why? Because there are other things at play. There is context, like I mentioned at the beginning. There's context, there's environment, there's time, there's place. Competitors, other actors in the environment that may have done other things that you didn't anticipate or could not even have been anticipated at that time. So it's very important that we don't take ourselves too seriously. Do everything you possibly can, but bear in mind that not every good call that you make will result in a good outcome. And some of your bad calls, sometimes you make some bad calls, but they resulted in a good outcome. And they say, hey, that's fantastic. My strategy was good. No, not necessarily. You just got lucky. Okay.
Thank you so much.
There's
Yeah.
Okay, David responded about the recording, so it will be uploaded on YouTube. Okay, thank you.
All right. So since we don't have any other question, I will just ask for final thoughts before we close this up. Hello?
Where are you starting from? We start from
okay,
Juliet.
I spoke last, so I think the gentleman can.
Yeah.
Okay, Wiebe, your final thoughts.
Yeah, Wiebe should go. Yes.
Oh, wow. My final thoughts. Okay, yeah, I guess just look, it's been a great session. It's great turnout and all that. Thank you, Austin, for doing this. And what I was actually, I've been out of Nigeria. I've been working outside of Nigeria since 2022. I've been away 3 years. And so often all you hear is just bad news, and I love the country, and sometimes it's just like, when is it going to turn around? And there are things that are happening now that you see some steps in the right direction. Still slow, but and then sort of like the Dangote refinery, like what a transformational opportunity. And then now you see self-interest again trying to undermine this again. And I just what I love about this group is we had up 50, 60 people here, maybe 70 because people came and went, and there was, from the polls in this group, there's this almost overwhelming optimism, overwhelming use of like AI and kind of like willingness to use the latest tools. And I mean, I just feel like there was an optimism here that perhaps shows that there is some light at the end of the tunnel. Again, the only news you hear abroad from Nigeria is always negative. Same for the rest of Africa, but it was actually refreshing to see this. And then also just to be on a panel with Juliet and Austin. Austin, I also bought your shares at some point, and did very well. So thank you. But again, it's been an honor to be on this with you and to engage with everyone here. So, being an entrepreneur in Nigeria is really, 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 really tough. Everything can get in your way. Everything can get in your way. But if you kind of follow those lessons I talked about and some of the other wisdom the other speakers presented, you can not only succeed but thrive. And again, I'm convinced Nigeria should have a $1.5–2 trillion economy. So, everything you're doing should be able to multiply 4x, like what Saba did, and more. So, it's great to have all these kind of ambitious young people here who are ready to take on that Nigerian economic wahala and kind of make the country better and make their own lives and their own communities better through the power of entrepreneurship. So it's been an honor to be on here, and thanks for including me.
Thank you so much, Wiebe. Mr. Okere, your final thoughts. But before that, just a minute to respond to Yakubu, and he's asking about your drum theory, don't run out of money. And he's saying, as a young entrepreneur that needs to pay salary, how did you manage not running out of money, knowing that can be the fastest route to debt?
There's nobody that always has all the money that he needs for his business. That's why you have banks. And there's every need to make sure that at every point in time you have anticipated your need and made provision for it. So if you know your cycle, you know that salaries are paid at the end of the month. Your overdraft for the month that you'll be short of salary be in place. Don't start when you already get to that point of you can't meet the salary, then you start looking for overdraft. You appear desperate. In fact, if you sit down with your banker and you discuss your annual cash requirements, you know when you have a dip because you are stocking, you know when you have a lot because your sales are going out of inventory, and therefore you can even place money on placement, but nobody has all the money he needs. The point is to plan for when there will be a dip so that there is the cover, usually from the bank. But at the end of the day, there is a difference between when you are short of cash and insolvency. Insolvency is when your unit of economics do not make sense. So you are always short of cash no matter what. And no matter how much you put in your own money, your friends' money, your parents' money, food's money, it's like a basket. So pluck all those holes on the basket before you go looking for money. But yes, every once in a while, you might need to fill in a liquidity gap because of the cycle of your business. My final thoughts. If there's anything that you will take away from this that will help, exactly what helped me. And I call it Austin's 3 powers, the 3 W's for success. If you have a pen, bring it out now. If you don't, type it into your phone. Austin's 3 W for success, or the 3 powers. The first power is what I call way power, W-A-Y, way power. It speaks to your aptitude, your knowledge of something that you are special at. People will say, if it is photography, go to Wiebe Boer. It should be like that for you. If it is technology, goes to Austin. If it is solar, go to Wiebe. You need to be known for something. If entrepreneurship, go to Austin. So that's the way power. Know a deep knowledge of what you can bring to the party as an authority. And that I say is your aptitude. You must continue to learn and refresh, because we have some very good doctors, but they don't refresh. So new methods of curing illnesses, they don't know it. So they were good doctors, doesn't mean that they will always be good doctors. So that's willpower. The second W is willpower. W-I-L-L, your will. It speaks to your attitude. It's about resolve. If you follow soccer, you know a team called Leicester City. They were promoted from the Leicester League, came to the Premiership 2015-16, and they won the Premiership with Vardy having the highest goal scorer of the tournament. None of the players were known. Eventually, they became known. N'Golo Kante, Danny Drinkwater, etc. But the point is, willpower speaks to your attitude. The power that says, keep going, even when things are difficult, as it says. If you fall down 7 times, stand up 8. Not until the bones are rotten, as we say in Ghana. Never say die until the bones are rotten. The last W, which I think that a lot of us Nigerians lack, is weight power. W-A-I-T, which is patience. We lack patience. When you have started the business, give it time to grow, nurture it. Nigeria launches a business. He's selling the seed, Series A, Series B, Series C. At the end of the day, he's so diluted that he's a glorified management staff in his own company. Nurture the business, let it grow to fruit, then sell at the fruit. Have patience. When you plant corn, in 3 months you can harvest it, but you have to cut it down and plant again. When you plant cocoa, you won't get any fruit until the 5th year or the 4th year, but it fits you for life. So you make the choice. The 3 W's: willpower, willpower, and power.
Thank you so much,
Okay.
Mr. Okere. Juliet, yes.
Yes, I'm in the unenviable position of having the last word on an Ausso Academy. I hope Ausso you still come back and round up, okay? Because that position should remain yours. I'm going to be a bit more specific in my final words. I speak to people who are in consumer goods. I've always been in consumer goods, retail, and distribution all my life. And I see that to a large extent, when people are designing and, starting businesses, there's this, nice esoteric, business school idea of the business and, the way it should run and all that is completely divorced from where the average consumer in Nigeria is. Okay. And I just want to bring people back down to that design with the consumer in mind. Understand how the consumer, every single, you do consumer mapping, and you know how they sleep, you know how they wake up, you know where they buy things, you know how they send their children to school, what do they put in their children's school lunch boxes. You've got to understand the consumer to that extent. We have this nice idea that we can just use tech and build esoteric and fancy things, but at the end of the day, the consumer just doesn't engage in that way. So, like I said, I'm being more specific to people who are in product design, product related kind of businesses that are their customers are really everyday consumers, not like it's B2B type of businesses. Remember the consumer, where he is, and if you can understand them and if you can design with them in mind, a lot of the issues that you're dealing with from an uncertainty macro environment, you find that all of those you're able to navigate them because you're solidly on ground in terms of how the consumer values the product that you have and what you're bringing to the table. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Juliet. Mr. Okere, you gave us the introduction, so please do us the honors of the vote of thanks.
All right.
So quick thing. So Austin, there was one more question. I don't know if you would like me to answer it or if you want to just round up.
Please go ahead and answer and then I'll round up. Please go ahead.
Okay, it's sort of like the $10 billion question in Nigeria. Why doesn't the power system work? Is it distribution or transmission generation, I guess? And I was in the power space in Nigeria for 5 years. essentially investing in and selling solar to the economy. And what we realized over time, and we got to this point because we would be meeting with highly educated, people with like Harvard MBAs and so on, highly educated, let's say regional bank managers or things like that, who would refuse to use solar, and they would use excuses like, oh, in Lagos it rains too much, or in the north there's too much harmattan, so we solar can't work in Nigeria. And we would remind them that you can actually generate solar power in the Arctic. And we kept wondering, like, why are people so resistant to what is such an obvious solution, right? Personal solution for their own business, for their own homes, etc. And what we realized was that the issue was not that they didn't want to use solar. The issue was that they didn't want the diesel deliveries to stop. So we did research on this, and it's very hard to get the information. We even hired a strategy firm to do a strategy on this, and they were so scared to actually come up with an answer that they basically abandoned the strategy work and gave us our money back. And it just showed how powerful whatever cartel is behind this. But basically, the problem is every year in Nigeria, about $6 billion is stolen by diesel over invoicing. So if you are running a bank branch, often your diesel tank, we'll say let's say 1,000 liters. It's usually actually only maybe 700. And so 2-3 times a week, 700 liters are delivered, 1,000 is paid for. And that 300 liters, the money for that is shared all along the chain, all the way up to probably the regional manager. And the same thing in government offices. The ministers and so on probably make a lot more money off sharing that money than they do on, because a minister will then run offices across the country, or their own ministerial office. And so the money that's shared from that is far more than anyone's salary. And so if you spread it across the nation like that, $6 billion a year, nobody actually wants the power system to be fixed. And the calculation we've done is if just over 20 to 30 years, instead that $6 billion was invested in upgrading and expanding the generation, transmission, and distribution network in Nigeria, we would actually have the 200,000 megawatts of power that we need to have for our population, and so on. So it has nothing to do anymore with regulation. It has nothing to do with, yes, everything is outdated. We have a grid that doesn't work. But in the end of the day, there's still a desire to get that diesel. And where we really learned that this was the issue, we thought when diesel went up to 800 naira a liter, this was around 2022, we thought, okay, finally, the economics of solar is going to be so strong that nobody can stop it. And actually what happened is the sales from our commercial partners and so on, commercial and industrial solar partners, it actually went down, and the generator companies we were in touch with, their sales skyrocketed, and it did not make any logical economic sense. The reason was at 800 naira a liter, the 300 liters on every delivery that was over invoiced and shared was worth a lot more money. And so a lot more people wanted a lot more generators so that they could buy a lot more diesel and share a lot more money. So it's kind of like the counterintuitive thing. It doesn't make any logical sense if you think about it, but the reality is it makes a ton of sense if you think about, so it doesn't make logical sense to think people in a tropical country like Nigeria would be against solar, but it makes absolutely logical sense when you think about the economic benefit to them as individuals, and how it's an incredibly clean way because it's an untraceable way of stealing money. It happens every day in almost every office everywhere in Nigeria, and until that stops, until people are willing to stop that and give up that revenue, unfortunately, our power sector will never be fixed.
Wow, Wiebe, that is quite disheartening. I'm not so sure there are so many people that will be willing to give up 6 billion or whatever amount per year. But we just have to find out how is Ghana doing it, how is Cote d'Ivoire doing it, how is Togo doing it. We're not an island in Mars. There has to be a way, and I'll leave it at that. I didn't want to tell anybody to tweet about this because I felt that you'll be distracted. But if you liked what we shared today, we'll do it next October 1. If there are things that you like your friends to know about that Juliet or Wiebe or I spoke about, tweet it to them, share it widely on social media, tell your friends about it, and look forward to see you, God willing, next October. Thank you very much for coming. And once again, happy Independence Anniversary. Bye-bye.
Happy Independence Day.
Bye, everyone. Bye.
Bye-bye. Happy Independence Day.